Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are. Welcome to episode 20 of the Groovy Podcast. Today is the 2nd of October, and I'm Peter Ledbrook, podcasting from London, England.
And I'm Ken Cousin, podcasting from Cary, North Carolina this week.
East Coast again. So, hi Ken, how have things been?
Oh,
Recovered from Spring 1.2 GX yet?
Yeah, because I went directly from Spring 1.2 GX to the No Fluff, Just Stuff event in Atlanta, so I had to do all that. And then this week I am teaching a Groovy class, fortunately, at a client in North Carolina. So the only other thing going on outside of us is that hurricane, headed up the coast, which it may hopefully just become a tropical storm. Now, what do they call it? Joaquin or something like that? Yeah, it's a big major storm headed up the east coast of the U.S., and it's raining outside, but hopefully it won't turn into anything awful for next week.
Okay, well, fingers crossed. I haven't seen any news about that, but it generally only hits the UK news when houses are being destroyed. Not quite that bad, actually, but
Right.
Well, good luck with that. Let's hope it diverts out into the Atlantic, or tops out.
I'm flying home tonight, and then I have a Grails class in Massachusetts next week, which I have to drive to. So I'm just hoping there's not a lot of flooding and everything's okay. But that's,
I imagine it's fairly rare for Massachusetts to get hit by hurricanes.
Every couple of years we'll get a good one, but this is awfully early in the season. You know how it is. I mean,
Right.
We're early in October, right?
Yes, I have no idea. We don't get hurricanes in the UK. We don't get extremes of anything in the UK.
That sounds very appealing at the moment, frankly.
We don't get much sun, Ken. It's not good.
Okay.
Anyway, let's get to the topic at hand. Speaking of Groovy, so there have been a few releases since the last podcast. We've got the Groovy 245 release came out.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the second release under Apache. And I think with that safely under their belt, 244 was the first one. They had to work out how they were going to fit in with the usual Apache way of doing things. 245 apparently went pretty smoothly. So there are discussions about Groovy becoming a top-level project, which is cool.
There was actually at 2GX during the Groovy BOF, the Birds of a Feather session, we had Guillaume there, we had Paul King there, we had Graham Roche. I mean, all the major players were there. And one of the questions came up saying, well, when are they going to no longer be an incubator project? When is it going to be a top-level project at Apache? And it turns out it's a question of number of releases and using their infrastructure and, all these documentation-related things that they are taking their time to get right. But they fully expect that maybe there'll be one more incubator release, but it's possible that either by the end of this year or early next year, there'll be a top-level project.
Yeah, that sounds about right, I guess. From what I gathered from the developer mailing list, there are no hard and fast rules. But yeah, I think they like, the mentors would like to see a couple of releases that go smoothly. So I think it wouldn't be more than one more release.
Yeah, I mean, they said that they could apply for it now and probably be approved, but they'd rather not apply and not get it, so they'll go through one more. And even though, I mean, this project's been around for 10, 12 years now, and yet it's an incubator because of the new infrastructure and the new mechanism here. And that's what they have to demonstrate they can work with, and then they'll be ready.
Yeah. I mean, the only thing that bugs me is, of course, most of the links will change again, but at least it's only once more.
Right. The other issue, by the way, came up somewhat related to that. Grails has a very active Slack channel now. I'm sure you've been aware of that.
Yes, I'm on there. I'm even on there right now.
It's very nicely done. The question came up as to whether Groovy was also going to have a Slack channel. And the response from Paul and Guillaume was basically like, well, there's no reason we can't, but Apache requires that any discussions that lead to actual changes in the language have to go through the mailing list, because that way they're documented in a way that can't be changed later. With Slack, you can actually edit the posts after the fact, and that could change the context of the discussion and make it very hard to understand what decisions were made and why. So they may, in fact, have a Slack channel. There's nothing against it, but they have to be very careful to make sure that anything that leads to a change in the language is handled through the mailing list instead.
Yeah, I think that's the right approach as well. And you only really want one source of one location for these discussions that are the authoritative location, I guess the best way to say it.
Sure.
Um,
And it's immutable, right? So everything concurrent's got to be immutable, right?
Yes, yes. I'm trying to think whether mailing lists could be immutable or immutable.
Well, effectively immutable, sort of like those effectively immutable things in Java 8 or whatever.
Yeah, yeah. Oh,
Effectively final, I suppose, is the better way to say it.
well, fingers crossed. Maybe by Groovy and Grails Exchange in December, it will be a top-level project.
That'd be great.
So other releases, Gradle 2.8 release candidate 1 just came out this week. There wasn't anything that I really noticed. It was mostly around performance changes and performance improvements,
Right.
and a few things here and there, but nothing really jumped out at me as like a big feature.
Yeah, I think the last big feature that everybody found amazing was the 2.5 release with the continuous build capability. I'm still showing that to people and going, "Oh, check this out," and they're like, "Oh, wait a minute, we've had this in JavaScript for a while." It's nice that now we have it in Gradle. But I haven't noticed any significant changes that affected my life in 2.6 or 2.7. I expect 2.8 will probably be similar, except for the performance improvements.
Yeah, it's they're just continually getting releases out. I think the biggest thing will be when they have the new model ready.
I wonder if then they'll jump to a 3.0. You know what I mean? It's like these are 4 to 6 week incremental releases.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think they, in fact, say in their document, there's one section of the user guide, one chapter is about the new rule model, and basically says this will be the foundation for Gradle 3. So when everything is using it, that's when the switch will happen effectively.
Which should also happen, I guess, by the end of the year or early of next year.
Pass.
Yeah, you're probably right. Because I remember when at the Gradle Summit, that's what they were anticipating. It's having it done by the end of the year. But that's, now that we're getting to the end of the year, they may go, oh, let's wait. I'd rather they get it right than rush that out. Gradle's not exactly a product that needs massive updating right away. So it's probably fine to delay and wait and get that right.
Yes, yes. Plus, remember how long it took for the dependency management to get rewritten in order for there to be a 1.0 release. So
I didn't even want to bring it up, but yeah, that took forever.
I'm not gonna commit to any dates for the release.
Right.
But I have actually committed to speaking about the new Gradle model and trying to get. The fact is, they're getting close enough that I think they want to get people to start learning about it, at least, if not necessarily using it. And I think if you're a plugin author, you should really be looking at it right now.
This is going to affect that Gradle plugin for Android, which again will have an impact on my life, but we'll get to that later.
Yeah, actually, I've got an item here about Groovy and Android. But while we're on the releases, Grails 3.0.8, a patch release. However, it sorted out the configuration files for me. So Grails is having a hard time making best use of Spring Boot, and Grails apparently have different views on how configuration is done.
Oh, okay.
So through various patch releases, it was trying to get that working, but that's working now. So config files are properly merged together, so you can have some in Groovy files, some in YAML, some in properties, in the different locations, and they should merge together fine.
I'm not sure I would be comfortable having both an application.groovy and an application.yaml. You know what I mean? It feels to me that would be asking for trouble, trying to rely on some conflict resolution rather than just doing everything in one or the other. But I know you have a way.
Typically, you wouldn't overload that stuff. But remember that the YAML is good for programmatic updates. The Groovy is good for conditional inclusion of configuration, or creating a database URL on the fly.
Okay.
For example, from an environment variable. That's what I do in one of my Groovy-based files. So yes, I mean, you may be not asking for trouble exactly, but Yeah, anytime that you have to think about how things are going to merge together, you need to worry a bit.
I suppose I should say, as long as you keep the different properties independent of each other.
Yeah.
As long as you don't have the same thing in both, then you're fine.
Yeah, that would basically be the main guideline, I think. Interestingly, they introduced Gorm events. So I didn't even realize that there was a new events check section, mostly because it's under the async programming chapter.
Ah.
But they're using the reactive project under the hood. And that they're using that to do a generic events-based system. So they're no longer using the Spring application context, which has its kind of pub-sub event model. And the reason that I'm interested in the Gorm events is because you get a notification of when the Hibernate session factory basically has been set up. And that means that you can hook into the application restart. So you're programming along, you modify a domain class, it gets recompiled, your application actually is kind of restarting behind the scenes. If you've got like a DB create drop, your database is cleared, but your bootstrap.init is not called.
Right.
So now you can hook in and set up your initial data, and it will always create initial data whenever basically the data store has been refreshed.
Interesting. I also find interesting that they're headed toward that reactive stuff. It looks like the whole industry is headed toward reactive in several ways. I mean, Ratpack lives on that stuff.
Yeah. So I still want to learn more about reactive because it's more an architectural style. You can do events without necessarily being fully reactive, I guess, or without being reactive streams. Ratpack is more geared towards reactive streams, I feel.
Yes.
And I think Grails tries to be fairly agnostic of that side of things at the moment.
Right.
Of course, if they do sit Grails 3 on top of Ratpack, they have a Ratpack profile, then of course that would probably be.
Won't that freak everybody out? I mean, one of the issues that was discussed again at 2GX was, why use Grails over, Bootstrap, or not Bootstrap, Spring Boot directly. And again, it was pointing out that it's the same reason you use Grails over Spring. It's like you have all this convention over configuration. You have all these additional libraries like Gorm. You have all the nice smoothing out of variations throughout the architecture. It's all the same benefits and the DSL advantages that you got before. I think once people realize that Grails 3 works so cleanly with Spring Boot, then I think that they're going to be revitalized again. I think it's going to get a lot more attention in the coming year than it has kind of late this year.
Yeah, I think it will take a bit of time for people to realize that it is actually a significant change from Grails 2. That a lot of the problems have basically been resolved by changes in technologies and narrowing the scope of the project, basically. So
and of course converting all those plugins. So because that was, as you saw, like Spring Security was holding up a lot of people, but now that's gradually getting resolved. With the major parts are already converted, and I suspect the rest will be converted soon.
Yeah. So the interesting trick will be like getting people who tried Grails, ran into some of the issues they run into, and like saying, actually, you can benefit from the stuff that you get with Grails, but with the much more solid underpinnings with Grails 3.
Right.
Even just like being able to incorporate it into a multi-project build so much more easily. None of this launching Grails build from Maven and Gradle.
Yes.
And running into those it's like the object relational mismatch, impedance mismatch. There's the build tool mismatch.
I did hear, by the way, I think it was on Twitter, that the next early access release of IntelliJ 15 is going to have that Grails 3 support in it, or at least a version of that. So they do seem to be on track to building Grails 3 support into IntelliJ. As Jeff Brown reminds me continuously, you don't need any of that. You could just treat it like a Gradle project and use the community edition of IntelliJ to work with a Grails 3 project. And I mean, I think he says, I do it every day, just to really drive it home. And that's good. I mean, it's very helpful, but I still would like to see the support in the professional or the ultimate edition.
Yeah, I mean, the main thing you're missing really is the GSPs.
Well, it's also the wizards, of running tasks inside and detecting changes and having the organization. I don't know. I got used to a lot of the IntelliJ functionality on Grails, and to have all that kind of gone, felt awkward. So it'll be nice to have it back.
Okay, cool. As you know, I'm not a big IDE person, so I don't really know what those changes are.
Yeah.
So well, we shall find out. I will try out the 15 EAP for sure. Okay, so we've got through the releases. So
You have something about SDK Man?
no, I don't. I guess I thought might have mentioned that in the last podcast.
Well, regardless, they've been doing incremental releases again. I think we're up to SDK Man 3.0.4, and you could do I mean, there were some minor quirks. See, that was the thing that happened at 2GX, is that SDK Man was released live at 2GX. I mean, Marco got up there and did a little talk about it and said, okay, now I pushed it out there. And there were some minor quirks in switching over some of the Macs from GVM to SDK. But you can do it SDK space self-update, and if nothing happens, you could do the same thing with a space force at the end, and it'll update you to the latest version of SDK Man, and now you're using SDK instead of GVM. And I believe, as I say, I think they're up to 3.0.4 at this point.
No, apparently 3.0.5 as of the 30th of September.
Yesterday.
2 days ago.
No, September's got 30 days, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, so it was yesterday. No, 2 days ago, because I'm wrong. Never mind. Yeah. Boy. Okay, yeah. So I don't know that I've done that, and I don't know what the changes were in that, but they do have the new homepage, sdkman.io, and they're very proud of their very cartoony graphic, which I imagine you've seen, right?
Superhero. It looks like a superhero logo. It's great.
It looks like, oh boy, and I saw some people in there going, man, it's hard enough to get a language named Groovy taken seriously without doing that. But it is very colorful, and it's a wonderful product. You just can't beat it. So at any rate, now that's available too.
Yeah, cool. Yes. Then lastly, you can continue to use the GVM command line. I mean, it's just like, as you said, a self-update and boom.
Right. And I was reading, I actually did something appalling, is I actually read the manual, at sdkman.io. I just was looking at the installation and the usage, and then there was a command to clean the archives, where did you see that? Yeah.
No, this is news to me.
Oh, I did this as a tweet, and people were like, really? And it's in the usage page, and it's called, let's see.
Is it flush?
Uninstall
or outdated?
Archive. Right. That's it. Flush archives with an S. And I did this, and I wound up clearing 8 gigs of space on my hard drive.
Wow.
Installations, yeah.
So what does it remove?
I assume all the zips of the old ones that you've installed but no longer are showing. Because if you try to reinstall a version of Groovy that you installed once before and then said uninstall, there's still stuff left. If you try to reinstall it, it says, oh, we found a cache version, and just builds it back in. So I think it clears that cache.
Oh, okay.
And there's a lot of stuff. I mean, over time, you build up a lot of room in that cache. So at any rate, the command is just SDK flush archives and see how much space you save.
Yeah. I never bothered with the uninstall command. I just went into the GVM cache and just removed all the files that I no longer needed.
You really are low level, aren't you?
I am. Yes, I can be very much so.
You're going to update Lazy Bones, or is that still just stable?
That's very much stable at the moment.
I used that at my Rat Pack talk at 2GX to create a new Rat Pack project, and it was very pleasant to see that it pulled the latest Rat Pack templates. I mean, you didn't have to change Lazy Bones at all in order to get a brand new Rat Pack project with the latest version and everything.
Yeah, I mean, fact of the matter is that the kind of project's stable. The most of the changes that I kind of envisaged for it are really big changes. So the stuff that you need to invest quite a bit of time into. So
okay.
And no one has stepped up to the plate to do any of them themselves. So anybody out there interested in contributing to Lazy Bones, I'm more than happy to help.
Yeah, real soon now.
Yes. Okay, cool. So conference-wise, we were the program committee for Groovy and Grails Exchange, which is in December, met. So we met on Tuesday to review the talks, and the acceptances should be coming out shortly. Certainly my acceptance came through today. So hopefully the schedule will be up in the not too distant future.
Excellent.
Mr. Hackey seems to have gone on a real writing spree. So he's got so many Grails goodness. I saw like 7 to 10 Grails goodness blog posts, mostly related to Grails 3 stuff. So he's switching a lot of things to Grails 3. So yeah, if you're doing any Grails, especially if you're looking into Grails 3, check those blog posts out to find out some of the new techniques that you would use to do certain things that you may have done differently with Grails 2, or just get some new ideas.
Did you see he mentioned he's going to start a new series as well on Rat Pack? He's going to call it Rat Packed, eat with an ED.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Not Rat Pack goodness.
No, unfortunately, or just like Spock's not Spock goodness either. That one's, I forget what that's called.
Is that Spocked?
No, it's something else, Spock Light or something. I forget. But anyway, Rat Packed will be the new series. Oh, and there's like ASCII Doc is awesome, ASCII Doc or something, you know?
Yes,
anyway,
I have seen that one.
Yeah, this is going to be Rat Packed with an ED, and I'm looking forward to seeing that as well. But yeah, he's been doing phenomenal work lately, just cranking these things out.
Okay, so I think we can expect a few new books based on his goodness stuff, those blog posts, with the amount of content he's generating. So yes, Mr. Hackey, we're expecting it soon.
But you're doing great. Thank you for all your work.
Yes, we do. Speaking of books, so your Gradle recipes for Android. He didn't, ladies and gentlemen, he did not pay me to mention this one. Don't worry. It's rough cut. So it's just like the Manning MEEP early access program.
Yeah, but it's a little bit misleading in this case because the idea behind the recipe books at O'Reilly is they're supposed to be short. They're not supposed to be 400-page doorstop books. You know, this is not Groovy in action. This is about 150 pages. I've got somewhere between 27 and 30 recipes. There's 27 in the early access version, but because the thing's written in ASCII Doc anyway, all the formatting looks pretty good. I mean, right now I'm cleaning up typos, and if I get any feedback, I'm doing that. And of course, the version's changed again, so I've got to update all the code and the figures. You know how this happens.
Oh yes, I know that. It's painful. It hurts.
It's pretty darn complete. I really expect to have the complete version out. Geez, I'd like to turn in all my changes by the end of next week and have it come out just in time for the holidays, right? You know,
that'd be great.
Right, for your holiday shopping needs, you can get a Gradle recipes for Rat Pack book, right? Oh yeah, I could see that happening. But at any rate, so that should be very soon. And that was, I got to say, working with the O'Reilly system with ASCII Doc and the Git repository and everything, that was really a pleasure.
Cool. Yeah, so I mean, just being able to use ASCII Doctor is really nice, I think.
Yeah.
And that could be why. So I think O'Reilly are behind Spock up and running as well.
Yes.
Not? So this is Rob Fletcher's book on Spock. He was initially considering doing a self-published book, but I gathered on Twitter that he needed the extra pressure of an editor going, you really ought to get this chapter ready.
See, so we have the Java testing with Spock book at Manning, which from what I gather is basically finished and they're in the release process on that. Whereas Rob Fletcher's book is now over at O'Reilly, and yes, I'm looking forward to that one coming out as well.
Yeah, so is it on an early release?
Yeah, Constantine, and I can never remember how to pronounce his last name, begins with a K, but it's called Java Testing with Spock at Manning. We've been seeing it update over the last few months.
Yeah, no, I was talking about the Spock up and running. So the first two
Oh,
chapters are available,
right.
early access. And of course, as mentioned in the last episode, Dan has his Learning Rat Pack book.
I gotta say, and it horrifies me to say this, but man, he did a good job on that podcast. I mean, I felt really bad I missed it, which I could have been there because my last talk finished at noon, and I could have jumped on, but I didn't realize you were going. And by the time I would have jumped on, but when I listened to it, I'm like, man, it's kind of a good thing I'm not there. I wouldn't have contributed anything. He was going on and on about the technical stuff, and I might actually have to reconsider the whole unfollow Dan Developer thing. And I don't want to do that. So I'm going to say, assuming the Learning Rat Pack book makes it out this decade, then I'll have to think about it. But we'll wait and see. But I got to say, I got the early access version. I got to tell you, there's a quick story. What happened to me is I was supposed to give a Rat Pack talk at 2GX, just like Dan was giving a Rat Pack talk. And I'm sitting there going, why am I giving a Rat Pack talk when Dan is, for one thing? But secondly, I'm going, all the documentation's out of date. It's all wrong. I don't know what to do. And then Rat Pack went 1.0 2 days before my talk. And I'm like, what the heck am I going to do now? And fortunately, Learning Rat Pack came out, and I contacted an editor at O'Reilly and said, hey, I need this. I need this now. And he sent me the copy, and I read the whole thing in like the next day so that I could update my whole talk. That thing. I mean, that is the tutorial that Rat Pack needs. That really is the documentation that is fundamentally required. And while the documentation at ratpack.io, I guess, has improved by leaps and bounds, it's still incomplete. It's still not as fleshed out as the stuff in that Learning Rat Pack book. So I think it's a phenomenal book. I think it's going to be wonderful. Just don't tell him I said that.
Okay, and we'll hope that he doesn't listen to the podcast. I'm sure he doesn't. You're fine. You're safe.
Yeah, how many
But
people
definitely
do, right?
don't not unfollow Dan Developer. Seriously.
Yeah. Okay. I'll hold off on that.
Excellent news. Cool. Okay, so right, that was the 3 books.
Right.
Um,
I do have to mention, as long as you're talking about publications, my Gradle Fundamentals video course is now available at O'Reilly as well.
Okay, cool. So that's on top of. Was that your first one, or did you do a Groovy one as well?
I've got 7, by the way. I've got 3 Groovy ones, 2 Android ones, a Gradle Fundamentals, and a Gradle for Android. All video courses at O'Reilly. If you're on Safari, you can see any of those.
Okay.
There's probably enough self-marketing.
Oh dear. Cool. No, it's interesting stuff. So these are the kinds of material I think that people need, because I still feel Groovy is a bit weak in that area. So it's certainly something that I work on as well.
Cool.
Okay, so on the Gradle front,
yes,
a couple of new hires. You will have heard possibly of Bert Beckwith. He joined Gradle Inc. So I just got confirmation he'll be joining the engineering team.
From what I understand, that's been a long time in coming. Bert he kept looking at it as, from what he told me, is that he was looking at it as like a dream job, and therefore he really is putting all this pressure on himself to get it right. And he didn't want to say yes until he knew he could really dedicate himself to it and everything. And of course, you're not going to do that until you jump in. And I think they finally talked him into it, saying, "No, come on, let's do this." So I know he's very excited to be there and very happy to work with those people.
Cool. Yeah. Well, they've got a lot of engineering talent now in the Gradle team. And they're adding Chris Beams. So some of you may not know, but he was one of the Spring Core developers.
Ah, right.
He worked closely with Jürgen. He's a really good guy. And so that's another great addition. He actually, I would argue I just would say was one of the biggest driver within Spring to switching to Gradle for their build.
Really? That's interesting to know.
Yeah. So, and I think that was one of the boosts for the build tool. So, hey, Spring Project uses Gradle. Must be reasonably good.
Right.
So yeah, that's 2 great additions to their team. I don't know if the Grails team, I feel that, so Who do they have now? Because I saw in the Grails diary that Jakob mentioned that it had gone from a team of 2 to a team of 6.
Well, we know about, of course, Jeff Brown and Graham Roche, and we know that
Dave Klein
and Colin Harrington is there.
Yeah.
Then I know there were 2 additional people hired. I'm trying to remember who they were. Did it mention it in the Grails diary, or it might have been mentioned on Twitter as well? I think I'd have to look that one.
I didn't see it in the diary.
They were such a presence. OCI was a major presence at 2GX. The actual CEO of OCI, the founder of the company, came to the Groovy BOF and stood up and said how much they were happy about the developments of the team and how much they were supporting it all. It's like we're getting more support from OCI than arguably we got from Pivotal. I mean, it's a really nice development and a great deal of interest and support at the company.
Yeah, it's cool. I think that's what certainly Grails needed it. That Pivotal support was limited, I would say.
Right.
So,
and of course, the other thing that was, sorry.
I was just going to say, I mean, they did keep the project going and invested in it, but I don't think they had any great plans for it.
Yeah, and I still think they're going to regret that. I really do, but that's a different issue. One thing, though, I mean, because this means that almost all the damage, PR-wise and otherwise, of Pivotal removing support has been repaired by this point, except for one thing. I mean, Groovy and Grails tool suite is in serious trouble. I don't know that anybody is working on that anymore. And at the conference, Graham mentioned that IBM isn't even having people working on Eclipse anymore. So that and it is a completely open source project. Anybody can. But if they've removed support from the core team of Eclipse, we don't even know what the long-term future of the base framework is. So I think over the next year, we're going to see a lot of migration, or at least from a spectator sport, trying to find out what the heck's going to happen with Eclipse and any of the tools that build on top of that.
Yeah, I really don't know. I'd heard similar stories about the sort of core Eclipse support. Certainly, GGTS itself is done. I think there's no more development there.
Right.
There's just development, potential development on the Groovy Eclipse plugin and possibly the Grails feature.
I believe they are looking for people to help support the Groovy Eclipse plugin. That's the one that people are interested in. I don't know that any significant work is even being contemplated on the Grails support inside of Eclipse, but that had been dying in GGTS for years. Every time they'd add a new version, they'd add a handful of features and break a bunch of things as well. So I don't know. I only use it when I'm at a client who has no choice,
Right. It's but it does leave, I guess, a gap for NetBeans to grow.
Right.
I don't know what the development's like on that, but it definitely seems to have more development than Eclipse as far as the Groovy and Grails side.
Yeah, it's a small community, but a vocal one. They don't like being overlooked. I don't like the
Understandably, I think. Cool. So I think that's pretty much covered most things. Other than, I guess that you should talk about the coming Groovy Podcast website.
That's right. We got 2 things. One is I talked to Ben Ellison at No Fluff Just Stuff. I'm on that tour, the No Fluff Just Stuff tour at nofluffjuststuff.com. And I asked if they would be willing to host a webpage for the Groovy Podcast, and they said yes. And Ben has put together a page for that. It's at nofluffjuststuff.com/n, the letter N, lowercase n, /Groovy Podcast. He's going to tweak it so that you won't need that N eventually. But right now it's in there, and it's a preliminary version, but it does have all the embedded Podbean podcasts for the audio and the YouTube videos as well. And there will be at least links to the show notes. I don't know how much of the show notes they'll be grabbing. And once we show up on iTunes, because he resized the graphic for us, so he made the graphic so that it would work on iTunes, and I went in and put it into our Podbean section and submitted it to iTunes, and I was hoping it would be available today, but I searched on it this morning and I didn't see it. But eventually you'll have an iTunes button you can click on even there and wind up subscribing that way. And hey, we may double our listeners, when we go to 2 to 4, maybe 4 to 8. I don't know. It could be really cool. So at any rate,
don't hate on us that hard. That's
well, the web page has one major problem, as you were so kind to point out, is that it should have you first, and it doesn't. And I'll talk to Ben about that, get that fixed right away.
The names are in alphabetical order. It's fine. Or I could say, actually, I'm in the middle, which is the most important place.
I can live with that, but I think Brooke wants some of his information updated. I mean, as I say, it's kind of under construction, but the page is available. All the podcasts and the video casts, everything is on there already. We'll put it in the show notes, but it's all in there. So that's wonderful, is that we'll actually have a homepage, and you'll be able to subscribe on iTunes as well as Podbean. And man, the what did they say? The future's so bright, I gotta wear shades, man.
Oh, that sounds wonderful. No, that's definitely the website's looking very nice.
Yes.
A great resource. We don't have to send you to YouTube and Podbean and all different locations for all our stuff. We'll say, hey, there's a new episode. Go to our website, and you can get to the links from there.
And
that's going to make our life so much easier.
Yes.
Cool. So yeah, is there anything else? Any news sort of you've, I don't know, interested in that you've picked up in the last week or two?
I think that covered pretty much everything. I do have to say that one of the things I did at 2GX, which I had not done a lot of before, is I spent a lot more time with Jeb, and I had not done a lot of that. And I tried out Jeb several years ago and kept running into problems. And yet now, when I played with it the last few weeks, I've really been impressed with that project. I really like what's going on there in the browser automation space, and the ability to write your little specs that will, the page model stuff is very impressive. And there's a lot of good work by people. There were some talks at, which one was it? The GrayConf, especially in US, about Jeb. And I've been very impressed with that project. It's just, I don't know that one gets enough press. But other than that, I think we covered everything.
Cool. That may be the case. I mean, to be honest, I hate browser testing, testing, but Jeb certainly makes it more manageable.
I'm sorry, I keep interrupting you, but I really was impressed with this one.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's what we used in Grails in Action, and it's so much easier to use than a lot of the other tools. The page objects, setup, everything is very nice. So Martin will be really happy to hear about that. And we may even have like a workshop at Groovy Grails Exchange covering testing, but that'd be Spock and Jeb.
Yes.
Have one of the, I guess the project lead. I guess Martin Erdman is the project lead for Jeb now. So.
Okay.
Cool. Okay, then we're all done. So we look forward to chatting to you next time in maybe a couple of weeks.
Right.
And we will have the show notes, which will have links to, for example, the website, the new website, and anything else that we've talked about. So all the best with all your Groovy, Grails, Gradle, and other developments, and we will see you next time. Goodbye.
Take care.